It is officially 1942, which means we have gotten through 1941. This has been the longest year yet overall in terms of episodes and real life time spent. I think it's been like half a year on this turn, on this 1 year, I think. Something like that. It's a very long time. And it's been eventful in some ways. Do you have any overall thoughts about this year compared to the other two, Travis?
It's been very painful.
More than the earlier years?
It's been more of a slower burn, I would say, this year.
Oh yeah, we got tons of things that happened. At the very beginning of the year, we had a little bit of a phony war, sorta. Not the actual phony war, because France had already fallen by this point. But if you remember, at the end of the last summit we did, you were very concerned about an imminent Operation Sea Lion. But that didn't really happen.
You know, I was kind of hoping you would try so I can destroy you with my fleet, but that ended up happening, which probably saved us both a lot of time and effort. But deep down, I am glad they didn't try.
I remember you were very worried when you saw that I had a paratrooper in France. You were like, I see that paratrooper.
Yeah, which I'm curious if he's still there. I haven't checked, but yeah, I was a little bit concerned because I have no idea, and well, still have no idea how they work in this game.
I had explained it to you when you that time occurred. You did ask about the mechanics, and I went over the paratrooper mechanics with you. Of course, it's been like 6 months in real life since then, but
yeah, I know something about like you can only drop them in certain areas and stuff like that. Because I know like in Hearts of Iron 4, you can just any airport and you can just drop anywhere.
You don't need an airport here, really. You just need to activate the mode to start flying, basically wherever you have supply, wait a turn, and then you can fly there and drop. That's how they work.
Interesting.
But after our very long and tense phony war with some naval encounters, which usually always got you grumbling, like your battleship running into a submarine. Also, the whatever exchange we had where you let that Italian destroyer go all the way home, we eventually led into, I think, the biggest event of the year, which is the invasion of the Soviets.
Yeah, and that's probably been the most painful event so far this year.
Has it? China hasn't been? The Soviets?
I was expecting China to die, but the Soviets, whew, you rushed in there a lot quicker than I thought you would.
Well, China's not dead yet, and the Soviets, I think, yeah, I did start that war like a month and a half early or something. Maybe 2 months early. I started a little bit early, and, well, now you have access to a lot more money. You have all that full Soviet MPP generation. You have Lend-Lease active now. Took forever, right? To get America sending money to the UK, and America is now sending money to the Soviets as well.
Gotta love money.
Now that we're in the winter of 1942, the beginning, this is that kind of historical point where the winter would slow down the Germans, and there's a high chance I'll be suffering big attrition due to the winter in a turn or so here, but it's percent chance every year, so we'll see how that goes. How do you think the war has progressed in terms of its beginning to now in historical timings? Because we're sort of, from what I see, near the historical point. In the south, I actually haven't pushed as fast as real-life Germany has, and in the north, it's turned out basically the same on the road to Moscow.
Yeah, while it's still historical, it's a little bit scary to see, in my view. But, yeah, I see you haven't made it to Stalingrad yet, though you are starting to encroach a little bit from the north and the southwest.
Yeah, the big thing was you had these big fortified defensive lines that you refused to let go of for a while, especially along the Dnieper in Ukraine. And once it broke, though, it's just been like an expanding of taking territory. But before that, it was mostly just really, really heavy fighting. How do you think the deal we made about the Baltic states has affected this war, if at all.
I don't think it's really affected much because you still taken a lot of, like, the Estonian border where it is now. I only got like a tile left that I border Estonia. And then you're technically almost at Leningrad here. So I don't think it would have changed much. I really think, if anything, it's going to change later. Like, either when I push back to Poland, or just, well, if you want to go conquer them for fun.
Yeah, the lack of Baltic states in the war really narrowed the front, which is what definitely helped turn this into a kind of a meat grinder for the longest time here while we were in this period in between the winters. Because without all that extra space, there was less for you to defend, there was less for me to attack, so it could have slowed things down, sped things up. It's hard to say without seeing what would have happened with that stuff there. But it definitely encouraged this meat grinder variant of the war that we had this time around. Do you think that things would have been better for you had you not left those three neutral?
Like you did say, it's really hard to say, and honestly, I really don't know. Like, I can make arguments for both. But I will say it definitely helped me when it comes to making you spend money by extra MPPs. You took damage instead of just going around me. But I don't know. I don't feel like it would have changed anything, honestly.
And so, what are your thoughts now on the effect of the trade we did for Greece and Yugoslavia?
I really wish I did it, but you know what? I'll just have to invade you instead. Well, I would have had to anyway, but I'll do it extra hard.
Staying in this northern, I guess, part of Europe and looking westwards, how do you think the Battle of the Atlantic has been going? What do you think about how that's gone over the past year?
Not very good at all, because I don't think I've killed a single sub. I've gotten really close, but you still have subs running about, and I haven't done anything about it.
I've noticed you taking some steps to try to, like, stop my sub movement, too. I've noticed some really weird, like, placements of ships that seem like they're trying to get in the way.
Yeah.
So looking at Africa and the Middle East and those areas, how do you think the war has gone on those fronts?
Well, I'm not really happy with Egypt right now. I was hoping to hold at El Alamein if possible, but that is not really, succeeded, really.
Yeah, you actually willingly gave that up last turn. You actually retreated back behind the river with basically everything that you had remaining. That is not something I was expecting.
No point in accidentally getting encircled or just letting my units die there. I'd rather pull back and let them regroup and replenish and all that.
Yeah, it's like we have a new Dnieper happening, but this time with the Italians and the Brits rather than the Germans and the Russians. What do you think about the intensity of the fighting there and the troops that both you and I have chosen to deploy in that region? Is it a bigger war, a bigger front than you thought it would be, or is it a smaller front than you thought it would be?
I did expect to see some more Germans down here, even with, Operation Barbarossa. Like, I was expecting still maybe some, like, German planes, maybe a German tank, just something. But it's really mainly just Italians that I've seen so far.
And I've seen you've taken the Sudanese out of Ethiopia and put them up on that front, too.
Yeah, gotta fill in the gaps as much as I can.
How is Ethiopia going, in your opinion?
Very aggravating, because I have no idea how you haven't fallen yet.
It's funny. Ethiopia is quite an entertaining front for some reason. It's not going anything like I expected it to, but it definitely feels like the Ethiopian front should be ending by the next summit.
Hopefully.
And then Iraq. You weren't expecting Iraq. Just kind of came out of nowhere, but you got the mechanic off eventually, and then it surrendered.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that historically, but it does make sense that they would mention that in game. And I've been kind of trying to implement that same tactic with Ethiopia of surrounding the capital and see if you give up. But
That's an Iraq exclusive mechanic. Doesn't really happen with any other countries.
Pain.
And for diplomacy, if you can even call it that, I noted that you went ahead with the historical invasion of Iran.
Indeed.
I think that'll make it, that whole area, a pretty interesting location, because that kind of comes with two sides. One side is that it allows the allies to get certain resources, but at the detriment of, well, Iran will never be on their sides now. But it also opens the war up in like a passageway in the Middle East. There's now a crossing between India, the Soviet Union, and Africa, where all these things now connect without me, for example, needing to actually declare war on anything. So that's quite a big expander to the fronts of the war.
Yeah. It can also mean theoretically you can go through there and then also attack into the USSR or go into India itself.
Yeah, definitely a risk to take, but it's a risk you went with.
We love oil.
Yeah. Looking at China. This is the big treacherous front with constant fighting. There's been some movements, but not an insane amount. A lot of the movements have actually happened more recently. But for example, at the beginning of the year, I had pushed up a little bit in other areas, but for the most part, it was only in the south that I had pushed up to this point. But it's changed now. You went ahead and did that one attack on Wuhan recently, and I led a counterattack after that was set up by your attack, by the way. I wouldn't have been able to do this counterattack if you hadn't attacked first. And I managed to go through, and I believe I've taken Yichang, or I'm like about to take Yichang or something. I was really close to taking Yichang.
I believe you already taken it.
Yeah, and so I've pushed through to Yichang, and also, like, that's really recent. There's also been some movement up, pushing through, taking Chengchao from you, which you had a pretty good control over until very recently. And the area north of Chengchao only recently sort of fell to me as well. Very small movement over the course of a year. Most of the movement has still been in the south again, where instead of just pushing up and kind of creating like a diagonal expansion, I've now pushed all the way west to Wanting and up against Chongqing, and even across the river over towards Chengdu.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty scary, and I don't know how to fight against it.
I don't think the Chinese knew either. How do you think that front, though, will go now that the war is on the verge of expanding? Because soon America will be in the war. What's your war justification this turn?
Wait, what do you mean?
America's mobilization number. What is it up to right now? Because I can't.
Oh,
check
it's 80%. That's why I was confused, because I thought it would have gone to 100 with Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, no, but Pearl Harbor didn't happen, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, 80%, and it's been rising dramatically. It's been rising like crazy. And so America's entrance into the war is pretty imminent. I don't think it's going to be too much longer before they're kind of at that point where they're in, and then, you know, the MPPs are going to go up. You're going to have access to American money that you could throw on any front that you want, because America really just kind of has that freedom. And on top of all that, how do you think it's going to affect the war in China, or really any other front, over the coming year?
I still don't have very high hopes for China, at least the nation of China, just because, well, money, troops, crappy equipment. I'm pretty much fighting with muskets and some kitchen knives right now in China, which honestly ain't that, far from historical, but, I would like at least a spoon too.
A spoon?
Gotta guide you out the alley somehow.
Moving into the Pacific, then, is the War of the Pacific, which we've now passed the historical date of Pearl Harbor. It happened in between, like, my turn and your turn, essentially, because I played on December 16th, I believe, and now it should be, like, early January.
Yes.
Isn't it funny that all of the big things that are supposed to happen, or that could happen, that we keep building up to, just usually ends up not happening, except for, like, the invasion of the Soviets?
Yeah, it's been very interesting with what's been historical and whatnot, especially with countries like Peru. I'm still eyeing them up, ready to drop some nukes on there eventually.
Well, hold up. Peru didn't do anything wrong, right?
They said they liked Adolf Hitler, so I'm not a big fan of him.
Everybody does. You remember the Olympics where that one lady went up and tried to kiss him?
Yeah, but we don't talk about that.
So what do you think about some of the things that didn't happen? Do you think there's a good chance of a Pearl Harbor, or a good chance of an Operation Sea Lion still, or does it seem like my strategy's kind of gone a completely different way?
Definitely a different way, but maybe suspecting instead of Pearl Harbor, you'll do a, I don't know, Sydney or something. Something related to something related to Australia or New Zealand, or especially now that you have the Dutch East Indies in your faction.
Yeah, that definitely shows a complete change of strategy, right? Because it's supposed to open up with an invasion of the DEI especially, but DEI joined me. I went out of my way to make that, what was it, the only nation that I diploed?
Yeah, the only one I noticed you ever diploed.
Yeah, my PvE one, I went for like the Ottomans and some others, but this time around, all I went for is the DEI.
Makes sense though, strategically.
Yeah, it's part of a strategy that I'm hoping will pan out.
Until I crush it. We'll just make Indonesia the 51st state.
Yes.
Well, actually, at this point, 49th. Or no, 48th. Wait, whatever the fuck. Yeah, 49th, yeah.
If your morale can take you that far. How has your morale been
will.
now that we're in 1942?
In game, it's looking pretty rough.
Player morale.
Player morale. Well, I love Daddy Roosevelt's in here with his money, and Manhattan Project you don't know about yet, but I'm very happy the U.S. is getting close to joining, so I can just spread freedom through them.
What difference do you think going back to Europe that Yugoslavia joining me has made? Because I remember you said to me that you were gonna feel some pain due to Yugoslavian troops that would be going to the front.
Yeah, which I guess for like once Greece would have fallen, then yes, that would be true. But I feel like now I could have really used that second front against you to just weigh down your MPPs, but I didn't get that.
But do you think the Yugoslavian troops themselves have made a big difference?
I don't think so. At least I haven't seen too much yet.
What if I told you not one Yugoslavian unit fought on the front this entire year?
Oh, okay. Maybe they're on the west wall.
Not one Yugoslavian unit ever went to the front. I was curious if you would have noticed that yourself. I was really waiting to see your reaction to that.
I honestly completely forgot what their roundel looked like, so I haven't been able to recognize them.
You can usually hover over the units and it'll tell you in like parentheses like where they're from.
Oh yeah, duh. I forgot.
Yeah. As for some of those deals, like with Yugoslavia and Greece, Norway, Sweden, those are still set to not change until 1943. So until the next summit, Norway and Sweden stay neutral. There won't be any raiding on them or in the Baltics. And Greece will still remain neutral. Neither of us will be attacking them or trying to get them to join. But stagnant as they may be, do you think these nations will actually make any difference in the long run once that does expire if we don't renew those deals?
If we don't renew it, then I don't know. It might change things. If we do renew it, then I feel like it won't change anything because, well, I'll just crush you with the U.S. military.
One thing that stands out of note that's kind of on the topic of a Operation Sea Lion that didn't happen, combined with taking Vichy France, combined with all the deals that have happened, is Spain. Spain has remained completely neutral. I haven't made any attempts to diplo them, and neither of us have really bothered them. I remember you were thinking that there was a pretty decent chance I might try to get Spain to join.
Yeah, I haven't noticed any diplo between you two, so I've kind of just ignored them myself for right now. I don't need to worry about them, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Until Patton is here, anyway.
Ah, yes. Now that you're about to have America and you already have the USSR, you're going to be making something like 2 times or more the MPPs I'm making. Do you think by the next summit we'll see some change in the progression of the fronts? Do you think it'll be majorly different by 1943?
At least in like Africa and the Pacific, I would really hope so. If not, then that ain't too good.
One front I wanted to visit that is, it's a small one, but I think it's worth mentioning, is I think there's been a surprisingly interesting front between the Finns and the Soviets.
We coming back for revenge.
It's been quite interesting because you've tried to attack it very aggressively in multiple ways, with your armies up front making pretty daring pushes, and that one motorized or mechanized that actually went behind my lines and took a town.
Yeah, I was hoping to do like a Hearts of Iron maneuver right there, but it didn't work out. But at least it put your attention elsewhere for a turn or two.
How do you think that front is going?
It's a little bit slower than I expected it, but eventually the Finns will see the error of their ways and give up.
Well, in real life, the Soviets never pushed in on them. They simply didn't dedicate the manpower over there. So the fact that you're actually dedicating some manpower to try to push, some of which have become casualties, is definitely ahistorical and an interesting change to that whole front area.
Indeed, but sometimes drastic measures will need to be taken. And even though this manpower could be used elsewhere, well, I could also use the MPPs Finland will give, but also the security of not having to deal with the North.
As we go into this year, one major thing will especially change. Before now, I've been the one that had the ability to dictate basically every single front because, you know, the Axis starts out with that advantage. Once France is done, the UK kind of gets to decide what they want to do, but they still have to respond in a lot of areas that I go into. But with America in the war, there's going to be this massively strong power that gets the entire world to pick from of where they go to conquer, reinforce, or open new fronts. I'm just very curious to see what it is you decide to do with them. But, any other thoughts other than what I've mentioned on 1941?
I'm very curious how the game will progress from here. Maybe if we'll see an early D-Day, a late D-Day, early Operation Torch, late Operation Torch. We'll just have to keep playing to find out, I guess.
Alright, well, I guess that's our summit. That's done.
Isn't it your turn to do the funny remark?
Funny remark. Well, I hope Washington enjoys the Japanese fleet that's about to drop bombs on them in the Atlantic.